Leonard Harlow had lived his life like a king, surrounded by wealth, feared by rivals, admired by opportunists. But now, at 72, he lay in a private hospital suite overlooking the glittering skyline of the city he had conquered. His body, once broad-shouldered and commanding, was frail, his skin a parchment stretched over sharp bones. His heart, the very engine of his empire, betrayed him more with each passing day. Specialists had flown in from Europe, from America, each armed with promises of experimental surgeries, cutting-edge devices, and miracle drugs. Leonard had dismissed them all. He wanted no knives in his chest, no tubes tethering him to machines. He wanted to die on his terms, not humiliated, not reduced to a lab rat. On this evening, the air was hushed, filled only with the faint hum of monitors. Leonard sat upright, eyes fixed on the glittering towers beyond the glass wall. He thought of the skyscrapers he had built, the companies he had swallowed whole. None of them mattered now. His empire could not buy him another breath. The door opened. He expected another sycophant, another doctor trying to sell him more days he didn't want. Instead, she walked in. Dr. Elara Moreau. She was young, younger than most who dared stand before him, and her beauty was disarming in a place where faces were usually lined with fatigue. Dark hair pulled neatly back, eyes sharp and steady, she carried no folder, no charts. Just herself. "You're Leonard Harlow," she said, her voice calm, almost casual. "I know who I am," he rasped, irritation flaring. "What I don't know is why they keep sending me children." She didn't flinch. She stepped closer, stopping at the edge of his bed. "They send me because you won't listen to anyone else. Because you've already made up your mind to die." Her bluntness startled him. Most people tiptoed around him, careful not to trigger his infamous temper. He narrowed his eyes. "And what makes you think you're different?" Elara met his gaze without wavering. "Because I'm not here to beg. I don't care about your money, or your reputation, or what the world thinks of Leonard Harlow. I care about one thing. Whether you want to keep control of your life or surrender it to death." For a moment, silence hung between them. The city lights blinked like stars outside the glass. Leonard felt something stir, an unwelcome crack in his iron will. "Control," he echoed softly. "Yes," she said, her voice lower now, deliberate. "Let me help you keep it. On your terms, not theirs." Leonard studied her. There was no fear in her eyes, no greed. Just conviction. It unsettled him. For the first time in months, he hesitated. And in that hesitation, the walls he had built around himself began to tremble. The hospital boardroom was a place Elara had come to dread. Gleaming wood paneling, a polished mahogany table, and walls adorned with portraits of past directors gave it an air of tradition, of rules that could not be broken. Tonight, the room was filled not with doctors but with vultures, Leonard Harlow's family. They sat in expensive suits and dresses, whispering about inheritances and signatures, about power shifting once the old man finally gave in to death. No one mentioned Leonard as a person, only as a gatekeeper to billions. Elara listened from the corridor, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She had treated countless wealthy patients before, but none so stubbornly willing to die, and none so utterly abandoned by those who claimed to love him. Inside her office, the glow of a desk lamp illuminated the file she wasn't supposed to have. It contained details of an experimental treatment, gene-targeted therapy that had shown remarkable results overseas, but was still unapproved in her country. Administering it without sanction meant career suicide. At best, she'd lose her license. At worst, she could face prison. Her colleague, Drive, Chen, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You've been staring at that file for hours," he said. Elara rubbed her temples. "If I go through the official channels, Leonard will be dead before the paperwork clears. He doesn't have that kind of time." Chen frowned. "And if you go around the channels, you'll lose everything you've worked for. This isn't just about your career. It's about ethics, about the law." She closed the file, but her hands shook. "I swore an oath to save lives. What good is that oath if I let a man die because I was too afraid of losing my job?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, counting down time Leonard no longer had. Finally, Chen sighed. "If you do this, you'll do it alone. I can't follow you down that path." Elara nodded. She hadn't expected otherwise. Hours later, she stood by Leonard's bedside. The room was dim, moonlight spilling across his face, accentuating the hollows beneath his cheekbones. He looked asleep, but his breathing was shallow, labored. Elara held the syringe in her hand. The liquid inside shimmered faintly under the light. Her pulse raced. She thought of her father's proud smile when she graduated, of the patients she had sworn to protect, of every rule she was about to shatter. If anyone finds out, she whispered to herself. Then she looked at Leonard, this man who had built empires, now clinging to life by a thread. She remembered his words from earlier, control. I want control. Her hand steadied. She pressed the needle to his arm. Live, she murmured, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. Not for them, for yourself. The plunger sank slowly. With it, she crossed a line she could never uncross. Leonard Harlow had grown accustomed to waking in pain. Each morning was a war. The crushing pressure in his chest, the icy numbness in his fingers, the shallow gasps that left him more exhausted than sleep itself. But when his eyes fluttered open this time, something was different. He lay still, waiting for the familiar torment to seize him. Yet the pain was muted, distant, like thunder rolling far away instead of striking directly overhead. His chest rose and fell with surprising ease, his heartbeat steady, stronger than it had been in months. Confusion replaced his usual despair. Slowly, he turned his head toward the chair beside his bed. Dr. Elara Moreau sat there, her body slumped with exhaustion, a loose strand of dark hair falling across her cheek. The glow from the bedside lamp softened her features, making her look less like the unyielding doctor he'd met and more like a weary guardian who had kept vigil through the night. Leonard's throat was dry, his voice cracked when he spoke. What have you done? Her eyes flickered open at once. For a moment, panic flashed across her face, but she quickly masked it with calm resolve. She leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. I saved you, she said quietly. He narrowed his eyes. Saved me? How? Elara hesitated, then took a steadying breath. I administered a treatment that isn't yet approved here. It was a risk, a big one. But without it, you wouldn't have lasted another week. Leonard felt a surge of anger rise, but it was tangled with something he couldn't quite name. You broke the law. You risked your career. For me. Yes, she said, her voice firm, though her eyes revealed the weight of her decision. Because you wouldn't risk it for yourself. You were ready to surrender without even trying. I couldn't watch you throw away the chance to live. He stared at her, struggling to process it. In his world, no one acted without self-interest. Every deal, every alliance, every gesture of kindness he'd ever received was tied to his fortune. Yet here sat a woman who had wagered her future on his life, knowing he could offer her nothing in return. Why? He asked finally, the single word carrying all the suspicion and disbelief of a man who had never been given anything freely. Elara's expression softened. Because life is more than money and power, Leonard. You've spent your years building empires, but you never built a tomorrow for yourself. I wanted to give you the chance, even if it costs me everything. The words struck him harder than any business betrayal ever had. His lips parted, but no retort came. Instead, a strange warmth spread in his chest, one that had nothing to do with the medicine flowing through his veins. Gratitude. And something else. Something frighteningly close to hope. For the first time in decades, Leonard Harlow didn't feel like a man waiting to die. He felt alive. The storm broke 3 days later. By then, Leonard's recovery was undeniable. The monitors that once sang his decline now traced the steady rhythm of life returning to his body. He could stand with assistance, his voice carried more strength, and his eyes, once dulled by resignation, now sparked with something fierce. But outside his private room, chaos brewed. Dr. Elara Moreau had been reported. The hospital administration acted swiftly, as if eager to make an example of her. She was summoned before the disciplinary board, her medical license suspended pending investigation. Colleagues who once respected her brilliance now kept their distance, afraid to be tainted by scandal. In the press, headlines blared accusations. Reckless doctor endangers patient, ethics breached in unauthorized experiment. Through it all, Elara walked with her head held high. She had known this moment would come. She told herself she would endure it, even if it meant losing the career she had bled for. What mattered was that Leonard Harlow still breathed. That had to be enough. But Leonard disagreed. When the board convened in a stark, windowless chamber, Elara sat alone at the long table. A dozen faces stared down at her from the other side, their expressions stern, unreadable. A prosecutor's voice rang out, sharp and unforgiving. "Dr. Moreau, you knowingly administered an unapproved treatment without authorization. Do you deny it?" Elara's voice was steady. "I do not deny it. I made a choice, to save a life when every sanctioned path led only to death." The prosecutor sneered. "You risked not only your career, but your patient's safety. Do you consider yourself above the law?" Before she could answer, the door at the back of the chamber opened. All heads turned as Leonard Harlow entered, leaning on a cane but walking with deliberate strength. Gasps rippled through the room. After all, the man was supposed to be at death's door. He didn't wait for permission. He strode to the front, his gravelly voice cutting through the silence. "She's guilty," he said, and the board leaned forward in triumph, until he continued. "Guilty of saving my life when I was too damn stubborn to save it myself." Murmurs broke out. The prosecutor tried to object, but Leonard slammed his cane against the floor, the sound echoing like a gavel. "You call her reckless. Then call me reckless too. I refused every treatment you offered. I chose to die. She gave me no promises, only a chance, and I took it. And because of that chance, I stand before you today, alive." He turned to Elara then, his voice softening. "I've built towers, corporations, empires. But in all my years, no one has ever risked themselves for me, not without a price attached. And tell her." The room was silent. The board members shifted uncomfortably, caught between rules and the undeniable living proof standing before them. Leonard looked each of them in the eye. "If you end her career, know this. I'll ensure she never wants for anything again. She gave me back my life. The least I can do is protect hers." Elara's throat tightened, tears stinging at the corners of her eyes. For once, the weight she carried alone was shared. In that stark chamber, amid scandal and judgment, something unspoken passed between them. A vow neither needed to say aloud. This was no longer about medicine or survival. It was about redemption. About trust. About the fragile, terrifying promise of a second chance.